Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
Today on Back to the Feature, we have a very special episode for you. It's been a long time since we've done anything like this, and every single episode I open up saying that it's the show that looks at movies past, present, and future. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about the future by speaking about the present. And today, we're going to talk about comic book movies. I think that obviously a question that's been flying around in everybody's mind ever since Logan came out is, what is the greatest comic book movie? So today, John and I are going to attempt to talk about comic book movies, what is potentially the greatest comic book movies, and what makes a comic book movie the greatest. What is the actual criteria of the comic book movie and that experience? What does that all encapsulate? What does that mean? So I think the biggest thing I'd like to start with is what was your first cinematic experience with comic book movies?
My first experience, Batman, 89. Michael Keaton was my first Batman, and Jack Nicholson was my first Joker. I love Batman 89 so much. It's one of Tim Burton's best, I think. So enjoyable, just everything about it. I love the world that he created.
I love the Art Deco style to Gotham. Like, it's kind of like, that's what I love about those movies. I feel like they're forever timeless, and I think that's something that some of the recent ones don't do quite as often, and that I really like about Returns and about 89 Batman is that it just sort of exists in its own world, and I think in that way makes them really timeless. I think a lot of the times when I go back to the Batman films or want to watch something on Batman Day, a lot of the times it's gonna be the Burton Batman, and that's the movies for me. That's where I really started as well. I mean, my dad was a big Batman fan. He loved the Batman 66. He loved the television show growing up. So Batman was a big part of my childhood. So of course, me being born in 90, Batman coming out in 89, I mean, that's what was huge from basically my existence onward was Batman. So Michael Keaton is Batman.
I'm Batman.
What are you? I'm Batman.
Yeah, that opening, it's so iconic, and it changed the game for superhero movies, and I think it's appropriate to talk about, just kind of start there, I mean, because it really is the originator of, hey, these movies can, one, make some serious bank, because that was the big thing, is they're we're selling, Star Wars, near Star Wars level toys for this Batman stuff. I remember because when I was a kid, I really loved when the action figures would come out. I loved I had that the Batman Forever, where you could switch from the boat to the Batwing to the Batmobile, And even though those movies were cheesy, when you're a little kid, those coming out, they're fun and the toys are fun. Yeah. So it showed everybody that comic book movies could be marketable. You could make real money with them, and of course, I think that's what ended up being the big problem with comic book movies for a while.
A little bit.
Because it was just always kind of aimed for that demographic.
Yeah.
And it's kind of nice to watch that demographic grow up and what it's then done to movies now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's fun, we're talking about Superman the movie too. Mm-hmm. That one is definitely aimed more, I think, for the adults.
Mm-hmm.
Overall. I mean, you got Marlon Brando, you got John Williams' score in there just post Star Wars 1977, so you kind of got that sci-fi cinematic to it at the beginning there, and then coming in. But yeah, I mean, that movie really is aimed for adults. And, you go into Batman 89, it's not really aimed at kids, because it is a very dark film, and Jack Nicholson is... I'm surprised, watching that as a little kid, how that didn't screw me up a little bit.
Kids shouldn't listen to Prince. It's a little heavy, I think, for kids.
But, it did launch... It launched comic book... movies in a different way than Superman did.
Yes.
I think Superman the movie, though, is, holds a special place in everyone's hearts, and it being one of the first, too.
Yeah, I think it has a real purity, and has a real kind of pure image of the character, which then, obviously 89's Batman was definitely trying to get away from the 66, the, shark repellent days, and... Yeah, you're trying to be more serious and being dark, and you got a guy like Tim Burton on it, and Jack Nicholson is the Joker. Yeah. I mean, that's just amazing. I mean,
it's still argued today if he was the best one.
I always think of them as just kind of different Jokers. Yeah. I think Mark Hamill's my boy.
I grew up with the animated series.
Oh yeah, and I think that was the big part of it too. Growing up with the Batman, Spider-Man, and the X-Men. animated series every Saturday morning. Yeah, you'd watch that with your Ninja Turtles.
Yes.
You know, maybe some biker mice from Mars. Anybody out there? Anybody? Okay.
Biker mice from Mars.
You don't remember that?
No.
Oh man, I'll have to educate you later. but yeah, I mean that's what was really in our lexicon of heroes, and as far as like what was really familiar to everybody. And like we said, that because these movies became so profitable, then we got a bunch of them through the 90s and then into the 2000s. And I think that really the next one to really make a big mark would have been X-Men. The first appearance of Hugh Jackman Wolverine, which if you've not watched that movie in a long time, it is hilarious to look at like what he looked like.
Yeah.
Back then.
It's like the Rock transformation. Dwayne Johnson is just progressively gotten more ripped and mean looking over the years.
It's kind of crazy. You're just sort of like when you look at him now and what he used to look like as the first time as Wolverine. He looks scrappy. He looks like a real scrappy Wolverine. But I think that it was definitely one of those movies that really stuck out, and I think it was just a lot of fun at that time, just seeing like a group of superheroes in any kind of way like that, where you have all these different people with different powers working together. And I think as kids, that's always a fun idea. You're Storm, you're Wolverine, I'm Cyclops.
It works.
And go and have fun and play. So I think that. That one was definitely one that made a big mark. I remember with a lot of people. I never remember like loving them, but I just remember them being like really good. I never like owned them.
I really did like the first X-Men. I was 10 years old when that came out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I loved Wolverine from the animated series. He's the guy who I kind of latched onto.
See, I was a Cyclops guy.
Which is kind of fun, and they still have never.
My life has sucked. I'm a big Cyclops fan, and it is just kind of. Oh man, James Marsden Cyclops, and when that's your reality, and I'm sure there's other Cyclops fans out there. We gotta hold strong.
And I know they definitely went a little too centered with Hugh Jackman's Wolverine. Mm-hmm. In the X-Men movies, he was he was the market for it.
The complaint, obviously, when Hugh Jackman showed up, was that he was too tall. Because Wolverine's supposed to have that short man syndrome. That Vegeta thing to him, I'll be the prince of all Saiyans. He's just kind of, it's with Wolverine. Yeah, that was always everyone's complaint. Which I think is always so funny is that everybody's complained all the way up.
Oh gosh, I mean like the
with
internet,
all these ones. Michael Keaton.
I said the internet. Pre-internet people lost their minds when Michael Keaton was cast as Batman, and he still holds. He's still one of the greatest, if not the greatest, to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I have a lot of nostalgia with Michael Keaton. Obviously, I don't. It's debatable.
I would say that I prefer Keaton Batman over Bale. I know like people will probably tear me apart for that, but I'm sure there's plenty of people that support that as well. But I don't know. I really love him as Bruce Wayne the most. I think he really plays that eccentric billionaire. Just really well.
He played it a little more mysterious.
And he's quirky. He's more quirky, I think. And I like that where, he's just kind of a little, like I said, he's a little off.
Yeah.
I know it fits very well with Tim Burton and his whole style. I mean, Bale I think is definitely solid, but I don't know. I really enjoy Keaton. And just kind of like, especially him outside of the suit as Bruce Wayne, I think that he is like one of the best as Bruce Wayne. Inside the suit, I think the limitations of the suit definitely, it makes it tough on those movies.
And the cinematics.
I think up through, until 25% of the way through The Dark Knight, I think that's always been the problem with Batman movies. Like, growing up. Like, I always think about that shot in Batman Forever, like when he goes down that chute, and then like they pour the sand, like Two-Face is gonna pour the sand on him, and he goes to look up, and he's gotta like bend all the way back to look up at the sand coming down on him. And I think it was like when I was a little kid, I was watching it, and I just kind of in that moment I realized, what is this? One sec, he can't turn his head. How have I not noticed that guy can't turn his head ever?
I've always liked some.
It'll be really tough to do martial arts when you can't.
Yeah, we can't look left or right.
Yeah. You always saw like Keaton doing a lot of the.
Yeah, you just gotta know. You gotta be ahead.
He's almost like in Vogue or something.
I love I something that I always remember. It's such a small, teeny little fact, but it always something sticks out. It's when he's driving the car and he's got the little glances that he does because he can't move his head left to right. But it's like it's something.
You get that in Batman Begins too, because when he goes from the Rachel, like
yes.
Bat cowls have not been kind to actors through the years. I think it's on Returns that Keaton was saying that he tore off the cowl on purpose like that, just like he didn't have to like tear it off for the scene. But he decided to because he was just so sick of it. I mean, imagine that, the plastic basically just like to your face and on your neck.
Oh my gosh!
It's like wearing like a sweat neck brace. I just couldn't imagine that, how clammy and awful that would be, a whole day of shooting in that.
Ugh.
Yeah, bat suits have not been kind to these poor actors. Until recently. I really love the cowl and BVS on Batfleck. I really like the Batfleck suit overall.
Yeah.
I think it's the closest approximation to the comic book, where, like, I really enjoy... Overall, I enjoy the Nolan series, but I feel like the Nolan series a lot of the times is kind of, like, trying to detach itself from being comic books, and it's kind of like, oh, this is comic book movies for, normal people who, don't really like those comic books that are for kids. Like, this is us trying to, open it to something that it's not, like trying to make it more real instead of, I think what Marvel does now, where they try to just adapt the comic books and bring that world to life, and then try to make the rules for that world instead of trying to put comic book movies with our rules on top of them. Not to say that Marvel hasn't delved into some more, like, realism.
Especially like
Civil War and Winter Soldier.
Yeah, Winter Soldier.
Mm-hmm. I think that, though, that I like that they still really keep that comic book style and tone. People can wear their costumes and stuff. It's not like trying to make urban terrorism Batman so he's more acceptable to, like, blockbuster-type audiences. I really thought this suit was just a little bit closer to really feeling like Batman from the page coming to life.
You're talking about Ben Affleck.
Yeah, with Batfleck.
His fighting style too. They definitely the DCEU is definitely really flawed.
Yes.
But they're getting Batman right.
Yeah.
For the most part. I know. Yeah, he kills people and like there's those complaints. Mm-hmm. But the way he fights, the way he looks, the way he acts, even his Bruce Wayne was really good too.
I think that like watching it on one of the times that I watched it, just trying to accept the idea of like, okay, so let's say this is angry Batman pushed to his limits. He's never been this before, and like you see like Alfred's concern, like trying to reel him back in and kind of realizing that he's going too far. I think that the problem is that we just don't see him before. We don't have the thing to compare where like we should be going like, oh man, Batman is like he's like just going off the deep end. Like he is just aggressive and he's angry and he's never been like this before. I feel like if we had seen a little bit of the before to like see the change, it would have been, I think, a little bit more impactful. And I think those movies are just missing those little things like that sometimes. Just the little, like nods and winks here to just sort of inform the audience and to give it some kind of history to it. Because I think it's so sudden. And that's a problem with the DCEU. It's just too much too quickly.
The DC universe overall has done very little. I mean, yeah, you get the Batman origin story over and over and over again, but a lot of the a lot of stuff is glossed over, I think, in all of the movies. And touching back onto what you were saying with Christopher Nolan's Batman movies, and I've been saying it a lot lately. I think just with like comic book characters brought to the screen and how they're going to hold up, with the longevity of these characters, it's like Nolan went that whole grounded, real-life version of Batman, but we're starting to see that people want, and I want, the comic book version.
Yeah,
And before that, I mean, it's groundbreaking. Nolan's Batman was groundbreaking for 2008, and that's what people wanted. Like, that's what... It surprised everybody.
Well, I really liked it from Begins. I thought Begins was really good.
I saw that 4 times in theater.
Oh yeah, I was a big fan of Begins right out of the gate. I really liked overall the tone, and I think everybody remembers the tone of those movies and what that kind of brought to the table for Batman. But yeah, I think the more that I watch them, the less I think that I like them in some ways. Like, I really don't think that the Christian Bale Batman, like the Bat voice, it just doesn't. It has not aged well.
It hasn't.
And very quickly. And I think that it doesn't help that, I mean, how many times have we heard the joke of the people doing the bat voice? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, it's just over and
it's,
over.
yeah, over and over and over and over again. And I think that there are some times where it just sounds laughable. I know that Christian Bale has even said that
he's
he
still
kind of
upset.
regrets a little bit of the choices he made with some of that. And I think that it really makes his performance, especially in the suit, a wash for me.
A little bit.
Like, it's really tough for me to really enjoy the Batman when he's doing that death metal garble growl gobbledygook. And I mean, I think that the voice modulator, there's flaws with that too. I think I like from a technical sample. Yes, I think no one should ever say no with a voice modulator on. We learned this with Darth Vader. Oh, you should never say Padme either. Now that I'm remembering this. Darth Vader, and then the one in BVS. No! It just always sounds goofy. It always just sounds really silly and goofy. Like, it would have been better if he was just like, oh! Like, he just screamed, like, would even be better. But it's the no! In, like, the voice modulator. It just, no one should ever scream an elongated no with a voice modulator on. Just please, someone in Hollywood, take note of that. It just doesn't. It always immediately to me seems really silly. So I like this. There's some issues I have with the voice modulator. I think it's a little better than the Batman is really trying to be in a grindcore band or whatever's happening in the Nolan trilogy. That has not aged well for me. Okay, we do need to reel it in a little bit here.
We jumped a
We
little.
start talking a little bit about just the Batman, and we'll talk about him a little bit more in relation to some of the stuff. But we were saying that X-Men in 2000, I think the next big one, and I mentioned it before, we're talking about the animated series that we grew up with. There was Batman, there was the X-Men, everybody knows that. And then Spider-Man. And Spider-Man was huge for me as a kid. Spider-Man is like...
I watch every episode of that.
He's the king of Marvel to me. You know what I mean? He's got the best rogues gallery. He's, when you're a kid, especially Peter Parker, how do you not gravitate toward that character?
Yeah.
He's literally like just kind of built for a kid. Like, what they did for when they brought Robin into Batman, it's like Peter Parker already was that.
Yeah.
You didn't have to, you know what I mean, just, throw something in for the kids. He really was telling a story that I think the comic book fans could really gravitate to, and the show did a great job, I think, of doing that too. And it probably has not aged as well as I remember. It's probably, you know what I mean? I haven't watched it in so long, I have no idea.
I've watched some of it. It's better than the modern stuff.
I've watched some of the Batman, the animated series. That stuff does hold up.
Mask of the Phantasm I just watched last summer.
Nice.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah, the animated movies are great. Enough Batman. Spider-Man.
2002 Spider-Man.
Yeah, Sam Raimi directing Spider-Man was obviously like one of the greatest choices ever, I think.
I love Sam Raimi's style so much.
We just got done doing our Evil Dead 30-year anniversary review, and it's we were just talking about how some of his stuff is so comic booky and so fun and energetic, and it was just a perfect fit for Spider-Man. And I think that overall, that movie really is, the first one and the second one are solid, and they hold up, I'd say, compared to a lot of the movies we get now with superhero films.
Fun fact, Stan Lee's favorite Marvel film is the 2002 Spider-Man.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting, because I honestly think I like the first one.
He's a little guy, though.
I think a lot more than a lot of people do.
The first film,
I think
do like the
besides
first film.
Willem Dafoe's Power Ranger suit, I'm really on board with
Willem Dafoe's a great villain.
Yeah, I really like him. He's a little over the top.
He's
a bit camp, but it's supposed to be.
The movie, it's before everything else, though. I mean, they didn't really quite know...
they have Nickelback and Saliva doing a song afterwards. I think that, Willem Dafoe being a little hammy.
I think, though, Willem Dafoe...
can be acceptable.
Willem Dafoe, sure, he can be a little hammy, but he also...
In that movie.
He can also be really... He's also really creepy.
Yeah.
And very intense in that movie, too. And
Yeah.
that fight scene at the end of Spider-Man, I still think is one of the best... fights between a hero and a villain in any comic book movie.
Not to mention,
one of the best.
I mean, when you already have a goblin face, I mean, it's kind of perfect to play a goblin.
It's true.
But yeah, I really enjoy that first one. We just watched the second one before we
Spider-Man,
did this video.
Yeah, Spider-Man 2 is...
And it's really a really solid, awesome superhero movie.
I think it falls apart. Some of the performances definitely fall apart.
Yeah, it's like one of Franco's worst movies.
I think, and Tobey Maguire...
is terrible. As terrible as his hair.
And honestly, Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst don't have the best chemistry.
No.
And then Sam Raimi's style, like, Sam Raimi loves close-up shots.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that style. I love that about Sam Raimi, but it just doesn't quite hold up with the performances coming from those leads. I think it could have been a lot stronger with different people, maybe, but
yeah,
that's a whole different thing. That's a whole different thing, though.
Yeah, that's definitely.
I love Spider-Man 2. The scene on the train, I think is a very important character moment. I think it's a really well put. It's a really awesome moment in any comic book movie.
I honestly really like
with him with his mask off. It's so important for his character in that movie too.
And I really love his conflict with him and Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus. That's one of like the classic comic book villains. It was so cool seeing him come to life, and honestly, one of the best. I'd say best portrayals of a villain in a Marvel movie still.
Yeah, he definitely
really
the standout performance, and the scene when he's getting his claws his arms taken off.
Mm.
Oh,
I do like too. Like that movie's not afraid to hey Alfred, why don't you pop that shirt off, bro?
Pop that shirt off.
Hey,
we're the duster.
Pop that shirt off. Yeah, we're the duster with no shirt. I mean, Alfred Molina's got some style. He has got some swagger.
You know, Dr.
And okay, and obviously as horror fans, gotta love the scene with the arms in the hospital room.
Like this, it's what I love about Sam Raimi, right there.
Exactly,
everything about it.
It's so they're really really fun to watch. I mean, especially from that standpoint, and he does a great job with all the action sequences. And I think that the CGI, though it is not perfect and doesn't look the greatest anymore, I think it holds up pretty well. You got to use your imagination a little bit, and he's a little Gumby-esque sometimes, but overall, I still watch that movie and it doesn't miss a beat. So
yeah,
I think those ones are really good. Now, Spider-Man 3.
Let's just not talk about Spider-Man 3.
We won't talk about that.
Everyone's in agreement the movie is bad.
Yeah, and I honestly was not a fan of the next two either, with the Amazing Spider-Man.
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of those movies either. Sorry, guys, if you guys were expecting us to talk about them.
Yeah, Andrew Garfield was honestly salvageable in those movies.
Yeah, Andrew Garfield and his chemistry with M. Stone is pretty good.
It's a bit of a cheat code, though. Like, if you're dating her in real life, y'all better have some chemistry.
Yeah, right. But I mean that the character moments between those two. But there's a lot of unbelievability in there. There's a lot of I don't know. And the action wasn't really filmed well.
No, it's not Mark Webb's forte. He's known from before that doing like My Chemical Romance music videos and 500 Days of Summer, which is like if you ever want to break up with someone, like watch that with them. So I mean, he's kind of more like doing the romance movies than, which I think is why I think the story between those two works, but I think that a lot of the other things don't. The action and a lot of the other like aspects of a superhero movie, But yeah, so Spider-Man definitely had a couple, some pretty good films early on, but yeah, seeing him come back in Civil War, though, was like a triumphant return.
Yeah.
I think that Tom Holland's
a perfect pick so far, from what we've seen.
Yes, small sample size, but I'm very excited for Homecoming, and I'm excited in the fact that it's going to be, like what I was talking about before, and what made Spider-Man so awesome, is that he is this teenage character, he is a young character, and it's great for, I think, kids that age to be able to connect to a character like that, and Peter Parker's one of the best ones for that. So, I think that it's about time we start addressing the question. We've kind of done a little bit of our little living history as far as, like, comic book movies as when we were growing up.
And just some of our thoughts on them.
And so, this is kind of the question here. It's like, what is really the greatest comic book movie, and what makes something the greatest comic book movie?
Honestly, I mean, we're talking about Logan. Logan just came out. I have put I know it's so short notice, and a lot of people are guarding themselves from just saying Logan is my favorite comic book movie or Logan is the best comic book movie.
Oh,
I have put Logan now in my top spot. I bumped Watchmen was my top before, and I've moved that now. And here's the thing, and this is just a brief thing, and I'll let you talk. But the thing about Logan, and the thing with like Watchmen compared to everything else in all the comic book movies, is it's like the defining moment in the film, and the weight and the emotional drama that happens to some of the main characters. with Watchmen. Sorry if you haven't seen it. I'm spoiling it for you. Rorschach. At the end of that movie, it's such a powerful moment in comic book films when he decides to walk out and stick with his convictions.
Yeah.
And he gives his life for his beliefs, and the other and that entire end sequence is just breathtaking. I love that movie so much.
What are you waiting for? Do it. Do it!
And Logan has a similar thing to it, and we haven't seen it in it. Where else have we seen it? We haven't seen it. Comic book movies, characters, they get out of it alive. They come out on top. You feel good. All these things. It's just like on to the next movie, on to the next movie, on to the next paycheck, on to the next paycheck. Whereas Logan was, this is it. Like, this is the end of Hugh Jackman. This is the end of Wolverine's character, Wolverine, Hugh Jackman's character, and him giving his life the way that he did. It's so impactful. It has so much. There's so much meaning behind that, and I think that's why, personally, why I hold Logan and Watchmen as my top two.
I think you're touching
I'll
on...
get into it more.
I think you're touching on something very important, and what you're talking about is, I think, a lot of the things that make superhero movies great. And it's watching these characters who I think that we, try to put ourselves in their shoes. I think that everybody loves that idea of, like, what their favorite one is, or who would they want to be in that group, or if they got to be that role. And I think it's about what you said. It's about conviction. And the other thing you're talking about is obviously about heroism. And I think that there's been some great moments throughout comic book films now that that really exemplify those moments, and I think that really show us why we turn to this genre. I think of a moment like in the movie Kick-Ass, where he's standing over that man, defending that person, and they ask him, why are you even doing this? And the speech he gives, that response,
so good.
It cuts right down for me, like right into that core of just like, this is what this is about. I think of Bruce Wayne, Ben Affleck, Batman running toward that building as it's falling. Like, if that's the stories we want to hear. These started off as serialized morality tales. They're modern fable. They're modern myth. And just like how human beings have always gravitated toward these kinds of stories, and we've tried to put ourselves there, or kind of make these totems of larger than life figures in order to like tell these stories. And I think that those are the qualities we have to really kind of look for, and what really sets these ones apart and really makes them truly great, I think, is those feelings that they can evoke. That larger than life, seeing these people like Captain America with all of his conviction, standing up for what he believes in, and watching great moments of heroism like what Logan does, giving his life to keep his race going, to send that next generation to live on and to keep trying. It's what makes the genre overall really great. I think that for me, watching that, I think these great morality stories, these great character stories, I think that Logan really does have kind of the best of those qualities in it. That I think that really, really makes the genre special. So, John, what then are some of the other contenders, and what are the other names that kind of come to mind when you kind of think about that, when you think about what are some of these great examples of the genre? And I think,
when you say Captain America, I think almost everyone agrees Captain America's trilogy. Now, I know Civil War was more of an Avengers movie.
Yeah.
But the story between Steve Rogers and Bucky, and it, culminating to that,
and Steve and Tony too.
And Steve and Tony, it's that emotional weight, and like that part of the teamwork and brotherhood and all these things, all these themes I really enjoy. And Steve Rogers, he's Captain America. Like, he's a guy who stands on his convictions, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Like, he's going to stand on his convictions, and I think that's something that's really special, and it shows through in his movies. Even the first one. People give the first Captain America so much crap. I think maybe people are coming around to it a little bit more.
Yeah.
But, there's moments in those movies, like when he's still really small and he jumps on top of the grenade.
Yeah.
Like, how do you not, like, almost tear up during that? Like,
that's one of those superhero moments.
It's one of those superhero moments. I think another one from the MCU, and I think I'm just going to do moments to kind of give you an idea. Like Thor. I love the scene in between him and his father when he casts him out.
Oh, yeah.
Like that scene that was pretty much improv that had like the cast and crew like in tears during it.
Yeah.
Like, you're a fool, an old man, you know, like that was, it's so powerful.
The old ways are done. You'd stand giving speeches while Asgard falls.
You are a vain, greedy, cruel boy!
And you are an old man and a fool!
Yeah.
It's such a powerful moment in the MCU. Yeah. But, you know, something with Logan, he's been with us for 17 years.
Yeah.
And he's someone that I've connected with, well, not really connected with necessarily, like, I'm not like this, you know, filled with hate, the same way, you know, like...
Have you been through tons of genetic experimentation?
Yeah, I have, you know, not
Do
like...
you have a metal-plated skeleton?
Not like that, but I think there's something in there that everyone can relate to.
Yes, for sure.
Everyone goes through life, and life has, you know, lots of roadblocks and issues and things that we don't always know how to deal with it in the right way, and that's something that Wolverine is always kind of...
You know, and the thing for me, too, and I think that, like, a lot of people are like, oh, you know, a lot of these people who love Logan are these fanboys. I've never been a big X-Men fan.
You've never been a big Wolverine fan?
Never been a big Wolverine fan, in fact, yes. And I should totally have short guy issues. And totally be, like, you know, on the Wolverine train, but I was never a huge fan of, like, the X-Men movies, except like the first couple, and I would go see them, but I was never, like, in love with them, never owned them.
I will say, just touching on this quick, I've never been the biggest X-Men fan either, but Magneto and Charles Xavier, like that, head-to-head, is probably the best in comic book movies.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it's Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, it's
and the movies with the social commentary that they have.
Yeah.
And the importance of all that.
And I think that's honestly the X-Men as a comic book and like his films and stuff. It's where they stand tall. I think is a lot of that social commentary and the honestly groundbreaking storylines and things that they did with the X-Men and what that means for so many people. And I think that definitely still exists in Logan. I think it's just a lot more subtle.
There's a lot of subtlety in Logan.
Yeah, I think that like that's one of the things I really liked, and I keep hearing a lot of people like who kind of are like, "Oh, the villain isn't good." I'm like, how is a giant like corporation that is like, you know, genetically changing their food and systematically destroying them and then taking little kids and experimenting on them? How is that not a good enough villain for somebody? Because that sounds like a lot of the villains that exist in our world.
Yeah, I agree. I like just going full spoilers here. You know, with the things with X-24, and this is something that I wasn't quite.
I never liked this kind of thing in a movie.
I wasn't quite sold on it. My first viewing, I walked out of the theater and I was like, okay, my heart is pumping. I think I love that movie, but I'm not really sure. There's a few things in it where I was just kind of lukewarm on, and then going in and seeing it again. And then just kind of seeing all of those little subtle things and understanding the references, like Shane, that's a big deal in this movie, and I think you're a little more familiar with it. But him fighting himself or him fighting the opposite of himself.
Yeah, and
white and the black.
It's in that movie. It definitely has the motif of the white hat and the black hat, and it's the idea of that, you know, Shane is this good man who puts down the killer, and that he's a hero. But a killer is a killer, and he has to deal with that, good or bad. And that's and Logan brings that up, and it's one of the things that he and X-23 can connect on, is that when they talk about taking lives, and that
you'll still have to learn how to live with that.
You still have to live with, you know, kill bad people, and it's like you'll still have to learn to live with that. You still have spent, he spent almost 200 years taking lives, and You know, like, I love what they did with that. Because I think we were talking about this earlier, is that the idea of immortality sucks. If you ever want to be immortal, honestly, don't be offended. I'm sorry, but you're stupid. Immortality is the worst idea ever. Because you basically then, you live forever, feeling all sorts of physical and emotional pain with no end. Your body's still, well, okay, let's still say the rules is you don't get any older. But that also means that you don't develop. That also means that as society and humanity keeps going on and becoming more technologically advanced and more advanced and more advanced, eventually in your eternity of living you become a Neanderthal to all society, completely ostracized and with no place. And then you would just beg for death. Now imagine being someone like Logan, feeling the kind of pain Logan has had to feel his entire life, being ripped apart.
He's ever known.
I mean,
dead.
He's been, like, nuked before. He's literally been nuked in a well like a Hot Pocket. Like, he lived that. And to have kind of walked that path, you know what I mean? And how tired. And he's dying from the inside out. I think that it was such a great look at what the kind of the price of being the last one left would be. And how that would like haunt you. And how that would just... You would want there to be an end. You know, one of the more important moments of your life is your death. You know, it's your birth and your death, and you choose what you do in between that. But you know, it is a part important part of life is that it does end. It has to end at some point. Otherwise, the parts in the middle don't matter. So we did kind of go around my previous question. The thing I really want to talk about a little bit more though is some of the other films. That we mentioned before, and you start touching on the Winter Soldier, Civil War. I definitely think that these are some of the best ones that have ever been made.
Do we want to just go with it? Do we want to just go there? Do we want to just bring up The Dark Knight? We've been having a lot of conversations about The Dark Knight lately.
It is the number one contender. It's the champion. It's been standing on top of that mountain since 2008. It's the greatest comic book movie. People have come by and it's knocked them all the way back down the hill.
Dark Knight easily, hands down. Hands down.
My problem though, and this is what happens I think sometimes with films, is that, I'm going to call it right answer culture in film, is that people perceive that there is a right answer to things. What's the greatest movie about? Citizen Kane? You know?
Yep.
It's a Citizen Kane of this, it's a Citizen Kane of that. How do you say something's number one? You say it's a Citizen Kane of it. And I think that having this idea that there's right and wrong answers, because people have asked me about Logan, and they ask me, you know, how good is it? And I'm like, it's really, really, really good. And I'm like, and they're like, well, you know, is it like the best? Is it the best of all time? And I'm like, if someone were to tell you that they thought that Logan was the greatest comic book movie of all time, I wouldn't think that they're wrong. I wouldn't sit there and be like, well, you're obviously wrong. You haven't looked at the statistics. Have you looked at the record? I think that it's a great part of movies that is subjective. You know, as critics, you try to come from an objective viewpoint so you don't sit there and not watch movies or try to understand what directors and writers are trying to present to you because you're too busy caught up in your wants and needs and what I want from the movie. That you're not actually watching what is being presented to you. Yeah. And you're also trying to you're discounting the opinions and the ideas of all these other things sometimes when you try to look at only your lens of just pleasure. So I think that when you're trying to critique a movie for other people or just trying to critique in general, you try to come from that standpoint. You know what I mean? Just because I love action movies or something doesn't mean that, you know, like, well, I don't like that horror movie because I don't like any horror movies. You know, and I think that it kind of gives you that blind spot. And I think that when you start talking about, like, well, what's your favorite, what's the best, that's definitely where the subjective thing comes in. When you're trying to do this ranking thing. And I think that we need to try to get away from this, like, right answer culture. Like, this is number one, this is number two. The Dark Knight is a really, really, really great movie. It's one of the greatest movies ever.
It deserves a lot of praise.
It does. It's one of the most well-crafted, and it is the best Batman movie that's ever been put to screen.
It is.
The thing is, though, I think that when I look at it and I look at Logan, my thing is that the emotional through line is just not there in The Dark Knight for me. Like, that character just doesn't really have anything going on besides just, trying to stop the Joker. And I think that this is the thing I've kind of brought up with Logan when people ask me a little bit about that. And, I think it's that relatability thing and how much of it really means something to you. It's really fun to watch The Dark Knight. But if someone were to come up to you and it's like, yo, you ever have one of those days where, like, the Joker is, like, terrorizing your city and you've got to, like, create, like, a Patriot Act device in order to catch him? You ever have one of those days? Whereas, like, have you ever had to take care of an, like, elderly family member who is, maybe...
Or someone who's delusional, someone who's sick.
Someone that is sick. Have you ever, had to start caring for a child? Or be a father? Have you ever just kind of, like I said, I think that these are all so much more human things,
It's very personable.
Yeah, it's very personal. It's about loss and it's about love and it's about this man's journey in his life. And whereas The Dark Knight, it's very plot driven. It's very much, there's these big convoluted plans that are being enacted.
I think with consistency's sake, and a lot of times whenever someone comes out now and says Logan's my favorite comic book movie and people were like, well, it had this issue and it had this issue, or I didn't like this about it, or I didn't like this about it. It's like you have to be consistent because you're not saying that about The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight has lots of exposition.
Yes,
it has lots of unnecessary exposition. I really don't like the third act a whole lot with Aaron Eckhart. It feels very rushed.
Eckhart's not a very good actor. Actually, I think that there's there's a few people in some important roles in there that I don't think are that great.
But like, I don't want to bash The Dark Knight.
No. I definitely don't want to come across that like I don't like it.
It's my number 3. It's my number 3.
Like all time.
It's my number 3 all time.
I think I'd probably say it's like probably number 2.
But like,
maybe 3. Maybe
I think going forward though into the future, like we've seen now when the Avengers came out in 2012, we got to see the comic book like come to life.
Yeah.
In a way,
yeah.
and people were like, "Whoa!"
I said it earlier.
Wow, like we didn't know this was possible.
I did say it earlier. Like Nolan's movies are definitely like, let's adapt this comic book stuff so that normies can like it. Whereas like definitely like Avengers is like, we're gonna like bring you into this fun Marvel world for like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And that's what I really love about a lot of those is that it's I guess in that way it's a little bit more of escapism. And it's not that I just want escapism popcorn. I think that the important thing is that there's all these different types. And that sometimes it's not about which one's better. It's just kind of which one really just kind of emotionally fits you that day, that moment, that year. I think you change as you get older. Certain movies I don't like as much as I used to.
I don't know if I would have liked Logan as much when I was 18 or 17.
Yeah, I think so.
10 years ago, would I have liked Logan as much as I do now? I don't.
Three kids ago, I'm sure it definitely changes.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of what Logan goes through, like I said, I feel like it's so much more relatable. Like I said, his villain is so much more relatable. If you look at the Transigen Corporation is the villain of that movie, which is kind of the way I look at it. Because to me, it's like that's what I love about Logan is that the villain is kind of this overarching. It reminds me of like Two Towers, where they're always talking about Saruman. And you're always afraid of Saruman, like showing up in his fucking army, it's this presence, this atmosphere. You feel this giant corporation is, like I said, is hunting them. Is hunting these children and like. It's to me, like I said, I think that's much closer to the villains we face in our world than like guys in makeup or are aliens coming out of a portal.
So like touching on the subject too of what I was saying earlier about people having that right answer thing, and I've come out earlier. I'll be the first to admit I've come out real early saying Logan is my favorite comic book movie. I don't usually do that. I've loved The Watchmen since 2009. So
I'm sure there are people who would fight you vehemently about that.
I'm sure there's a lot of people out there. Exactly. But I love the Western style in this movie. And I know some people were like, well, let's give it a little bit of time. Like, will this hold up? Mm-hmm. This movie will absolutely hold up. Yes. This movie might actually hold up better than any comic book movie that has come out so far. Mm-hmm. Besides maybe Watchmen. But because
obviously someone thinks a movie's underrated.
But no, Logan. It's that Western. It's that simple storytelling about man versus himself, and the movie is going to hold up. It's a story that could have been told 60 years ago, and I'm sure it could be told 60 years from now.
Well, I think that it's not too just about like the whole like facing himself thing. I think people keep saying it like that, but I think that the thing is you have to remember is that we're bringing his life to a close, and he needs to open up that closet and deal with all those skeletons individually. And I think that like people talk about like it being a retread of his previous issues, and it's like you'll realize I think as you get older, there's certain issues that just kind of keep coming up. As much as you want to change and do some stuff, it's do some things to be different. People struggle. They have their challenges in life, and I think that a lot of the times you do end up unpacking things that are much older. And I think that, and I mean, trust me, there's tons of things that I've yet to experience. I'm not that old, but I think that it's definitely so appropriate for that character to have to, like I said, open up that closet and deal with all of that baggage and all of that past and all of the things that make him who he is.
I think a really important thing too is people hung up on well, does it really fit in the timeline or like his previous two films? And why is this character still kind of... This movie is absolutely standalone. Mm-hmm. Like, yes, there's tie-ins, obviously, because it's the same universe, or alternate universe, alternate timeline, whatever you want to... Whatever mindset you want to kind of think of it as. But this movie is the first time that they had probably complete freedom to make their Wolverine movie they've always wanted to make. Truly. And because of that, this movie from start to finish Wolverine's character. It's his character arc from start to finish. You can watch this movie alone without watching the trilogy, without watching any of the other X-Men movies, and understand the character in that. And I think that's what it's so good about it. And this is the third in a trilogy, guys. This might be the best third of any trilogy.
Yeah, that's hard to argue.
It's got a lot of strengths.
It's unconventional, and this is maybe because I'm not a big X-Men fan as far as the films go. Who gives a shit? Who cares a shit about the continuity? Fox is not giving a shit about the continuity of its X-Men universe in like a decade. Why is anyone floundering at that part of it? Because like for me, that's what I thought when I sat down. Because I was like, who gives a shit? They just even Deadpool knows that the fucking that the timeline's all screwed up.
That guy was up there before we got here.
McAvoy or Stewart. I guess that's how I feel about it. We haven't mentioned that guy at all in this conversation. We might have to. But yeah, with
Patrick Stewart?
No, Mr. Deadpool. No. Sir Deadpool. He might get knighted if he keeps going on this route. It was great to see him before the show too.
I know a lot of people too were there's the complaints of Patrick Stewart maybe going out too quickly, or they glossed over it or rushed over it. What are your thoughts, Giovanni, on that?
I don't know. I think that like for me, like in this run, I think that's like probably the second most important character, and it was such an interesting, great part to the story. I think that Logan and him having his only father figure there and taking care of him. I think it's obviously that's
Chuck.
I mean, obviously it's a big part, I think, of the emotional through line for a lot of people.
Yeah.
I think he's fantastic in the movie, and
it's his best performance.
Yeah, for sure. I know a lot of people don't like that he swears because they're like, well, in the X-Men, which I think is funny because it's like in this movie they literally go, yeah, these comic books are not exactly what we were like. We didn't wear costumes, and Professor X probably wasn't like a perfectly spoken dude all the time. Like, I kind of think it's funny that like people are like kind of complaining about him swearing when it's just when Logan pretty much tells you when he picks up that uncanny X-Men that this is bullshit.
Yeah,
they're people in this movie. Yeah. They're not comic book characters. They're supposed to be people, and I think that the continuity question for me, it's just one of those things. Who gives a shit? They haven't given a shit in a long time. As far as it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. And I think that the only thing that it really gives us, as far as the previous movies, is we kind of have a shorthand for mutants, for Logan, for the terms, for kind of the world. I think overall. And that's it. I think that's all you really need. It doesn't matter, I think, where you watched it or which X-Men movies you watched, or if you've never watched an X-Men movie. I think that that part of it really doesn't matter. And if you're one of the guys that gets hung up on that can definitely be, your thing. But it's comic books, man. Like, how many times do they go back to volume, to issue 1? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, maybe that's the comic book reader in me, where I kind of, the continuity thing, I don't give a shit. I just want a good story, man.
Yeah,
I guess I'm too much of a comic book nerd at heart in that way, where, I just, give me a good writer and a good artist, or a good director in this case, and just tell a good freaking story. Just tell a good story, and I think that Logan just it's a masterstroke kind of story, and I think that taking influence from Westerns, especially Unforgiven and Shane, were such appropriate choices to end Wolverine.
So appropriate.
And we haven't really harped on the whole thing of, wow, it's just breaking all this ground. It is the first time I think we've seen actual, true, great finality or conclusion to a character's story arc. I'm sorry, but The Dark Knight Rises doesn't do it for me. It does not.
That's it.
Oh, shit, whatever he even says. Some British stuff, right? I mean, I don't know what he says. I don't drink tea. So, and him there with Anne Hathaway, the plainest white lady ever.
But I think honestly though, The Dark Knight Rises kind of hurts.
Yeah.
The Dark Knight a little bit.
It's just kind of a giant plot hole after plot hole.
And here's the thing. And here's the argument I'm going to throw out here, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Empire Strikes Back is an amazing film, but guess what really caps it off? It's the end of Return of the Jedi.
Yeah.
Return of the Jedi is a weak film, but it sums it up.
It's not
perfectly.
a weak film.
Not weak. It's weaker than the second film. I'll say that. Yeah. It's still one of my favorite movies.
A lot of movie cinephiles have first world issues. They do.
That's
the best of the Star Wars original trilogy, so it's garbage to me.
I've never been of that thinking where it's like, I think overall I probably don't like it as much as the others, but you're right.
I know
it's so important in telling the rest of the story, and I think that that movie is why Darth Vader is my favorite character.
Yeah.
It wasn't Hayden Christensen in the prequels that won it for me. So it was that moment. It was him throwing Palpatine down that chute.
Yeah.
It was the fight between him and Luke. It was the closure at the end. It's a great capper to the story, and I think that is important. I think that Rises. I think it's funny because Rises actually for me it helped Batman Begins, but kind of harmed the series overall.
Yeah,
it has great connective tissue all the way throughout, but then there's just so many.
It just kind of like
it just ends on such a bad way. In a bad way, I think. With I just never feeling that conclusion for the character. It just didn't feel good. So as I said, I think the name of the game with Logan and what it does that is groundbreaking and special is that idea of giving closure to a character.
I was so emotional at the end of Logan. Actually, there's a lot of different parts in this movie that really had me in tears. One of the moments at the beginning of the first action scene, when you're introduced to Laura, there's this scene. There's this shot. It's very subtle, but I think it really screams hope. And it's when Logan first witnesses Laura breaking out and just like showing her claws and start killing all these guys. And the camera kind of sweeps over to him, and he has this reaction on his face, like almost disbelief. But at the same time, there's something in him that's like sparked. There's something in him that's sparked, and people say that the movie doesn't have like hope, or like the bad guys won, and like all this and that. It's like Wolverine stands his ground at the end of this movie and kills everyone to save the small group of children that may or may not be the only surviving mutants on the planet. It is so hefty. It has so much weight to it. But I love that scene in the beginning. I love a lot of the subtle things. Hugh Jackman is a fantastic actor.
Yeah.
He is an amazing actor, and he does things subtly as well as things that are over the top with him just showing his claws and taking people out. We've all seen that video now on YouTube with him in the studio.
Auditioning for Knuckles?
Yeah, auditioning for Knuckles, yeah. But no, Hugh Jackman just brings it in this movie, and his emotion, really sticks with you, and it should. And I've heard the things too with Lee Schreiber should have came back. It's like, no, I don't want to be reminded of Origins at all. I don't want to be reminded of it. I want this movie to stand on its own. I want this movie to be one of the best ever. And I think with Logan, Wolverine, fighting himself, fighting pure rage, pure anger, the genetic experiment that is X-24, that's, it just, I don't know, man, it just brought something out of me, I
don't, and I think I said it earlier, I don't typically like this whole thing of like, oh, he's got to fight the bad version of himself. Like, I really don't typically like that in any movie ever. Like, I've just famously but I love the idea in this, but I think it's because of the fact that we've watched Logan for so long and we've seen him go up against this enemy, this, like, big, like, corporate entity that keeps trying to make him this experiment. He's trying to make him this weapon. It's like, he is literally 180 years old. These people are still, he's still seeing the ramifications of what they've done to his life. It's like, it's like this, to me, it's like this big embodiment of them owning him, of them, like, just kind of possessing every little part of him, and I think that's what's so interesting about him coming up against that, and why it's such an interesting villain, why the corporation as a whole, that it's like, to me, that's the through line, because it's like, it's in the same villain. It's these people that take them and experiment on them and change them and ruin their fucking lives. Like, they're still ruining his life. They're still making a copy of him to turn into a weapon. They're still not done with him. They're still taking things from him. Like, it's just, I never thought I'd like that, but it makes the stakes to me so much higher because of the previous. Doesn't matter, like I said, in continuity where this is what's been happening to this man his freaking life.
Yeah.
And that, I think that's what makes it so painful, and that's what makes it, I think, just for me, it makes the X-24 thing work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I know people. It's like people want it. People thought it was rushed. Mm-hmm. The end was rushed. That they wanted more fight scenes. It's like, sure, I could watch 45 minutes probably of Hugh Jackman cutting out, but it's the restraint, guys. It's a slow burn. It's the reason why each slice, each cut feels the way it does is because they don't just give you everything. It is, and some of those famous old westerns, it's a matter of just a shootout real quick. Sometimes it's 10 seconds, and
there are a lot of great westerns where there's really only like a big opening action set piece,
which this has one of the most fantastic openings.
Set piece, and I think that all of the fight scenes in this have meaning. They all have purpose. They're not there just to have a fight scene. They're all there to tell the story, and I honestly didn't find any moment in this movie to not be engaging. I think there's a lot of other comic book movies that are a lot easier to, like, sit there and eat popcorn to and just like, oh, this is so fun. But for me, this was engaging all the way through. I was so interested. I was so curious about this world, this post-mutant world, and what that meant for the character, and what that meant for their future if there was going to even be one. I think the stakes are huge in the film.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And I think that it's Logan's greatest enemy rearing its head one more fucking time. That's what his greatest enemy has always been, is people like that.
Yeah.
And to see it continue on, it's just like this, like, parasite he can't just cleanse. And he may have finally stopped them and maybe given hope to the future of mutants. So yeah, it's such a huge ending. It's such an emotional ending for the character, and then too for mutants, for the X-Men, for the legacy of the X-Men, and the hopeful continuation of mutants in the future.
Yeah, like going back, if they ever continued it, if they ever went with Daphne Keene and the X-23 and that group of mutants.
It'd be cool if they waited.
And then totally.
Had new mutants, new mutants.
But it's like looking back at that moment, of Wolverine coming back, like standing up for what he always has done. He's always beaten himself up for being this terrible person, or he's kept this hate and this pain down inside of him, and that's why he didn't want to do it. He just wanted to lay there. I just want to die. Like, I don't want to be doing this forever anymore.
He shows Laura that there's capacity to love, that there is hope,
Yeah.
Still.
And when he gets up and he goes running into the woods and he ejects himself with that, and it's kind of like you knew when he put that in him that he was going to die already.
Yeah.
I mean, I figured at the beginning of the movie, honestly, but that's when you knew that's like, okay, like the timer is set. And I'm going to I'm going to slowly put my seatbelt on because this is going to be really crazy and emotional for me. And it was. It's just one of my favorite endings to any comic book movie ever. Period.
So yeah, I mean, that's been quite the conversation I think we've had today about Logan, about comic book movies. John, throw me up some names. What do you think are some of the best then?
Some of the best,
Logan.
well, obviously Logan. I love Watchmen so much. I might be more of a minority on that one. I still hold The Dark Knight to a lot of praise. It's still one of the best ever. And then some of the Marvel movies too. I love Winter Soldier. I think Civil War though is now my favorite. It's really close though between Winter Soldier and Civil War. And I do like Guardians of the Galaxy too.
Yeah, those are...
But 1989 Batman always holds a special place in my heart. It always will. So I always like throwing that one in there too in the discussion.
I always, 89 Batman, that's where it starts. I'm a huge fan of Winter Soldier. I love that movie inside and out. I think I really do like it more than Civil War. I think just because it's a little more focused in that way where it really is more focused on that one character, and I think that it honestly is... It's the movie that finally got Captain America to be interesting. It's the first time, I think, almost even on paper, too, where Captain America was truly interesting, engaging, and you really started to, I think, understand and kind of, in a way, fall in love with that character and what he stands for. So I think that's why I really love that movie. It's such a great representation of that character. It's the first time I ever was like, I love Captain America. He's awesome.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
too. Yeah,
like,
totally.
They got him in a way finally. And I mean, even when you read the comic books, he is not a fun read. He's never been a very good read, to be honest. Another one I think that people don't talk about enough is the first Iron Man movie. I mean, I think it really set the tone for being able to bring the comic book to life. I think people forget, too, with the first Iron Man, is that in the comic books, Iron Man was not a popular comic book character.
No.
And it was another one of those things where I think that, like, the first time, like, Robert Downey Jr. brought that character to life in a way where then people were like, oh, I get what he's supposed to be like. I think when people read him on the paper, he's like, this guy's a dick. And then when Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr. comes to town, he's able to translate in a way that you're like, okay, now I get where he can be kind of endearing and like you kind of get his humor and actually like him. You just love to kind of hate him. So I think that the first Iron Man, though, has third act issues. I think that overall, though,
it's a pretty solid movie.
And I mean,
the issues
is
still
really
early on too.
The issues are really that it's more rote, that he just kind of fights the main villain, who's just kind of an evil Iron Man. You know what I mean? But I think that overall, though, the way that it's made and put together, it's a really great film. We wouldn't have any of these other ones without it, and I think that performance alone is one of the greatest things in comic books. It's why we even have these
the MCU.
the MCU, but then getting to Civil War, I put really, really high. It's a really great, such a well put together movie, and for like the comic book, like the giant splash page feeling of a comic book. That larger than life and seeing all your heroes together, it really does do that in that airport sequence. It's like
it's just a culmination of your childhood.
Yeah, you're reading one of those amazing like issues of a comic and these big team ups and stuff, and it really brought that to life. As did the first Avengers movie, but I think that the first Avengers movie, that after you get away from the event, I think that it doesn't quite hold up.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one too.
Like as time goes on, I think it's just kind of our favorite flavor of Transformers movie, and we can't just admit it. The Dark Knight I hold really, really high. I think it is, like, for me, number 3 or number 2. I mean, it depends, I think, a little bit. I think it's my biggest problems is just that it's more plot driven than really character driven, and that I think that there's definitely some things that aren't like just absolutely perfect. I think we need to put it on a pedestal. I think is my thing with it. Like I think it's great, but we don't need to put it on this like untouchable rung like up with Godfather movies and stuff. I just think that's a bit much. But I sometimes could jokingly call it reheat, but that's just a joke. But yeah, I think that Logan, it really just kind of embodies a lot of what is great about superhero movies, and I'm so glad that we were able to finally have something like this that, like, not just serious in the way that it's dark and for adults. Like, it's really serious in that I think that it really touches on things that really can affect us in our lives, and its villains are very real. I think that it is. I think it is. And might hopefully be remembered as the greatest comic book movie of all time. So everybody, that's been our discussion here on Back to the Feature. I'm not sure how long this video is going to end up being, but I hope that you stick around to the end and make it here with us. You guys can keep finding us here on YouTube, like and subscribe at Back to the Feature. You can find us on Twitter and chat with us on there at Back2Feature, and on Facebook on our group, facebook.com/Back2Feature. I've been Giovanni Carlo.
And I'm John Vanderloo.
And we'll see you guys next time.
I guess you guys aren't ready for that yet. But your kids are gonna love it.